Welcome to the Boom Bap Kingdom. Yo, peace. Welcome back to the Boom Bap Kingdom. I know it's been a minute. I mean, it's been a long time since I posted, and I didn't mean for that to be the case. It just kind of worked out that way. I had to move the lab to a whole new room. Later on, I'll do a video about that. I've got a couple new pieces of gear and a new board interface. I picked up the SP404 Mark II, and my laptop started to go on the fritz, so I had to resurrect that. But then I said, let me just build a new micro PC. So nonetheless, I'm back, and I wanted to pick up where I left off. And the last thing that I posted was about making boom bap drums, and in there I was talking about chopping up the kick with the hi-hat, the snare with the hi-hat, trying to keep those accent notes coming after the kick and the snare, and that creates more fluidity, a little bit like more of a live drummer for me, and probably a lot of boom bap dudes. We want our drums to sound authentic as possible, and that's where the pitching and this, that, and the third comes into tune. If you're on a modern MPC or the Force or the Plus Machine Plus, the 2400, you could even change the bit rate. You can lower that to give it that 12-bit sound. That MPC 60, SP1200 type warmth and sound, etc. So there's a lot of tricks, but there's a lot of things I really didn't cover in that particular video. So you don't always have to use the accent notes. Some of it is also based on pitching. Now, me personally, I chop my drums off vinyl. Every once in a blue, you might find some drums in a nice sample kit. But regardless, if it came from a record or a kit or a sample pack or whatever the case is, me personally, I don't want my drums to sound exactly as they did from the source. I want my drums to sound unique to me. So that's also where pitching, sound stacking, all of that comes into play. So just think about that as you watch the first video. And again, you don't always have to use that accent note on the end. You can also use a little bit of reverb on the end to make that snare sound a little bit more live. Now, one of the things I really wanted to talk about was patterns. Now, not specifically actual patterns per se. There are a few you should have in your toolkit, but what I really wanted to talk about is velocity and patterns. So with that being said, if your kick and your snare is constantly playing at the same velocity, if your hi-hats are at the same velocity, it doesn't necessarily sound realistic. Even if the pattern is dope, it might not sound realistic. So when you combine the more realism with a dope pattern, guess what? It's going to sound even doper. You heard? So I kind of wanted to show you that. Now, when I made my last video, I did it on Machine Plus. I did finish that beat, by the way, and it's fire. I might post it in a later video, but today we're on the 2400, and I kind of wanted to go over that. So let me play just the drum samples. All right, just kick, snare, and two hats. In the 2400, I do not double up kicks and snares because the pitching is such like the 1200 where you can really get those things to crack. Whereas in everything else, I find you kind of have to double up and pitch. But 1200, in the 24, I've never really had to do that. So I don't do that, right? So we have a kick here. we have a snare. And those are pitched, right? We have a hat, and then we have a small hat. What I call my big or thick hat, and then my small hat. Big, thick, small. All right? So what I want to do here is get sounding like a real pattern, a nice pattern. So I already laid down a hat. Now, if you want your things to sound live, we talk about velocity. Now in MPC, and I believe it's also in the Force, they do have a setting in there where you can automatically alternate velocity. I don't prefer to use that. What I like to do is in MPC or in the Force, I will use 16 level velocity. And then I'll do on the 2400, I'll do multi-mode level, right? And so as I'm playing those hats or whatever I'm playing, I can get the different velocities, right? The different amplitude, different volume. And that lends to the more realism, and you'll see, right? So if we just do the simple hat just to get timing down with the metronome, right? You get the idea. And now I'm gonna add this and give it a little bit of flavor. So I'll go into multi-mode level in MPC, just go to 16 levels and velocity, and now you get this, right? Technically, it's the same trick with the Boom Bap Echo on a sample, but now you're doing this with your hats, right? So if I record on this pattern, and now you're going to get a little bit more flavor because the main hats are going kind of up, down in volume. So when you begin to add your kicks and snares to that, you're going to get some flavor. So now what I would do is I would lay down the basic pattern. Now there's a couple of patterns that are dope that you should kind of just know for boom bap, and then you can kind of build off those. So you have that, right? And I didn't really change the velocity. It's a very simple boom bap pattern. Boom, boom, bap, boom, boom, bap, right? That's a good one to know. But now we kind of want to build on that. And you can, off that one pattern, you can build, like you can make 80 different patterns off that one pattern, right? But the trick would be now is you could change your velocity on your snares if you want to. What I tend to do is I change the velocity on the kick, and I don't change it. I'll add kicks in between to kind of give it that natural boom, boom, right? That kind of feel, a louder and a softer kick, you know. So I would go into multi-mode level or go into 16 level, and I would record on that pattern again, typically in a new track on that same pattern. And then I'll intersperse a couple of different couple of kicks. So I'll just find a couple that are at a volume that are not as loud as the main kick, and then kind of slip them in there.
Boom Bap Kingdom says it's time for some drums.
You see what I'm saying? Let's lay that down.
official.
So I think you get the idea, you know what I mean? That's the other little trick that I kind of wanted to show, is just kind of using different velocities on different patterns with either the kick or the snare, the hats, or both, or all. You know, you can kind of mix it up. Now, one thing I don't do it on this machine, and I don't do it on this machine. I do it on the Force, and I do it on the Plus. I turn off the full velocity when I'm making my beats on those particular machines, the Force and the Plus. And when I'm doing that, I can perform the velocity the way I want just by the pressure I use on the pad. And I feel when I do that, I get a real nice live feel as well. When I'm doing it on the 24, and you could do it on the 4000, you can turn full velocity off, you know. But typically on the 2400, I kind of like to make a second pass with the lighter notes that I'm going to play, you know. So I hope that was a dope tip for you guys. I wanted to do a follow-up and share that tip. Another thing is you want to add a nice dirty open hat. So when I'm doing drums on the 2400, my drums are always classic and classic 16 for the pitch. So classic for the audio engine, classic 16 for the pitch. That's how I do my drums. Let's lay it down. Let's play it. Alright, so there you go. Another little trick. Alright. So those are just a couple of cool things you could throw into your toolbox. Again, when I meant, you know, patterns, I wasn't necessarily going to show you how to make, you know, what a boom bap pattern per se could be. There are tons of examples out there if you just listen to some good early, you know, golden era, like 1992 to 97 era, you know, East Coast hip hop. You're gonna find great examples of that, you know, in terms of actual types of patterns. And I might talk about that in another video, because that is important. But I wanted to kind of show the velocity stuff. I think that's an important trick to add to your toolbox. And I did want to talk about, you know, every once in a while throwing in an open hat and then just pitching that snare. All right, so I brought the hi-hat up just a little bit, just to fill in the gaps between the thick hi-hat and the small hi-hat. So there you have it. Just showing how to add a little bit more realism to your drum patterns. One thing that you may or may not want to use, depends on the machine you're on, is the swing. Some machines are real good at swing, like a Kai MPC. I find that the Force is not really good at swing. It's just too tight. So I just turn quantize completely off when I'm on the Force. Machine Plus does swing a little different. It's not quite like a percentage, you know, on an MPC, or like on the 2400 there's a percentage, and you kind of have to play with that to get to the swing of your taste. Typically good boom bap, if you're using quantize and swing, you're kind of swinging beginning at around 60%, between like 60 and 63, 65. That's probably where you want to be if you're using the swing. Once you use a little of that, and you add in those other notes, or use a little velocity on those kicks and snares, that's a great way to make your drums sound as close to a break beat or a live drummer as possible. So I hope you guys liked the video. I hope it was informative. I hope you learned something. I hope you can apply it to what you're doing and get out there and make some beats. All right, I'm gonna hit you with a BBK salute.
BBK salute.
All right? Peace and be safe. One.